Miriam considered herself a patriot. She watched the news every night from her clean, quiet apartment in Tel Aviv. She listened intently as the defense minister spoke of bold plans to dismantle Iran's capabilities, to ensure such conflicts would never happen again. She saw the triumphant reports from Gaza, the footage of soldiers securing a building, the confident assertions that the military's morale was unshakable. Her son, Ben, was in Gaza. He was part of it, and she was deeply, fiercely proud. Then Ben came home for a 48-hour leave. The boy who left was gone, replaced by a thin, silent man who flinched when a car backfired in the street. He moved like a ghost through the apartment that was once his home. He barely ate. He wouldn't talk about what he'd seen. Miriam's pride was slowly being corroded by a gnawing, unspoken fear. The confident hero on her television screen and the broken boy in her living room were two different people from two different wars. As he prepared to leave, he hugged her, his body stiff and bony. "I love you, Emma," he whispered, his voice rough. He pressed a small, tightly folded piece of paper into her hand. "Don't read this until I'm on the bus." An hour later, her hands shaking, she unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a list of 7 names. Underneath the names, Ben had written 3 words. "These were my friends." The television was still on in the living room, a politician's voice booming confidently about victory. Miriam sank into a chair, the small piece of paper feeling heavier than a stone. The 2 narratives of her son's war had finally collided, and one of them had been obliterated. Miriam's story, wow, it's like a sudden chilling realization, isn't it? And it perfectly sets the stage for our deep dive today. What we're stepping into is this incredible, often heartbreaking tension between how we understand conflict on a grand strategic scale, the big picture, and the raw, unvarnished human experience of those caught right in the middle of his machinery. We're going to explore how nations play geopolitical chess, how that looks from the front lines, and the deep chasms that form between the official narratives and the private truths. It's really a journey into understanding the war that's reported and the war that's truly lived.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating here is precisely how these two realities, you call it the geopolitical chessboard, and then there's the soldier's heart, right? How they interact and, so often clash. Our mission today is to unpack that. We'll be looking at the strategic calculus, the kind of cold logic that drives national decisions, but also the profound psychological costs borne by individuals, the real human impact, and critically, how public narratives are deliberately shaped, to manage perception only to be challenged and sometimes utterly shattered by undeniable personal trauma. It's about peeling back the layers, trying to see the full complex picture.
Okay, so let's start with that macro picture. Miriam, like so many people, heard those confident pronouncements on TV from the defense minister, bold plans to dismantle Iran's capabilities, ensuring future security. Sounds powerful, but what exactly do these bold plans actually entail? What's Israel's core strategic philosophy driving these actions? How has it evolved?
Yeah, you've hit on the core principle there. Since its founding back in 1948, Israel has pretty consistently pursued a security doctrine that's deeply rooted in, overwhelming military strength, intelligence supremacy, and a very cold, pragmatic realism when it comes to diplomacy. Its survival, its deterrence, it's not really built on international consensus or some abstract idea of moral clarity. Instead, it's fundamentally built on dominance.
Dominance. That's a strong word.
It is, and it translates into a clear philosophy. Hit first, hit hard, and then, and this is key, then manage the political fallout. It's a profoundly pragmatic, almost unyielding approach. Force is consistently seen as preceding diplomacy.
So shoot first, ask political questions later. Is that too simplistic?
It's maybe a little blunt, but not entirely wrong. The political consequences are calculated and calibrated after military operations have been executed, not before. And a crucial aspect of this doctrine, one that often surprises people, is Israel's meticulous effort to ensure it has the necessary political space, that kind of international breathing room, to act forcefully before any significant global condemnation can truly take hold and restrict their actions.
Okay, that makes sense. They create the space first. So that's the philosophy. Hit first, hit hard, manage fallout, secure political space. It sounds like a really complex dance of power and precision. But how does this actually translate into action on the ground, especially against a major adversary like Iran? Can you give us some concrete examples? What does that look like?
It absolutely is a complex dance, but it's one executed with immense precision and a lot of foresight. The strategic doctrine really hinges on surprise, pinpoint accuracy, and exceptionally integrated intelligence. It's not about mass mobilization or these prolonged, drawn-out engagements. Those tend to be really costly, right, in lives and resources. The model is rooted in speed and absolute clarity of objective. Eliminate threats, profoundly degrade the adversary's capacity to fight back, and maintain overwhelming escalation dominance, basically ensuring they always have the upper hand.
And we've seen this pattern.
Oh yeah, consistently over decades. Think of rapid, targeted strikes on militant leadership, stuff that leaves minimal collateral damage, ideally. For instance, the 2008 assassination of Hezbollah's Imad Munia in Damascus, that was textbook, carried out with extraordinary operational secrecy. Or, more recently, the 2020 remote-controlled killing of Iran's nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. That showed a really sophisticated blend of intelligence and tech capability. These operations aren't just one-offs, you understand. They're designed to project power, to demonstrate capability without waiting for anyone's permission or, widespread approval.
Right, surgical strikes, not broad warfare. And you mentioned this doctrine is deepened since 2022. What does that mean? What kind of advancements are we seeing? How are they doing things differently now?
Yeah, it's evolved considerably. Since 2022, it's really deepened into what you could call a highly sophisticated multi-domain approach. What we're seeing now is the seamless blend of cyber, electronic warfare, and kinetic methods, actual strikes, all in tightly integrated operations. Some analysts are calling it fusion warfare.
Fusion warfare, okay.
Yeah. And if we look at examples from just 2023 and 2024, strikes in Gaza and southern Lebanon involved highly advanced SIGINT tracking.
Signals intelligence, right, listening in.
Exactly. Intercepting and analyzing electronic communications signals to figure out enemy movements, intentions, stuff like that. And that's blended seamlessly with real-time drone surveillance and deep cyber infiltration to take out senior commanders. There was one particular operation that really stood out. They neutralized a target in Beirut using a booby-trapped smartphone, rigged with spyware detonated remotely.
Wow. A smartphone?
Yeah. I mean, imagine the intelligence precision, the technical skill required for that. Another operation reportedly involved a Hezbollah strategist being lured out of a fortified compound by a faked voice call and then killed by a precision drone strike.
Unbelievable.
It really shows the maturity of this fusion warfare concept. Cyber deception, electronic warfare, real-time drone coordination. They aren't just add-ons anymore. They're standard integrated components of how they operate. It's a truly adaptive and technologically advanced way of dealing with threats. Minimizes their overt footprint while maximizing the impact.
Okay, fusion warfare. And then we get to the June 2025 strikes on Iran, described as a doctrinal apex. That sounds like a really significant escalation, a culmination. What made those strikes so exceptional?
The June 2025 operation was, well, you could call it a strategic masterpiece in terms of executing this doctrine. It represented the absolute zenith of this approach. It unfolded with brutal precision over just 72 hours, targeted critical installations across multiple Iranian cities: Tehran, Isfahan, Natanz, key IRGC aerospace facilities. More than a dozen senior nuclear scientists, missile engineers, and IRGC commanders were eliminated in these precision drone and airstrike raids. And crucially, this is where the fusion really shines simultaneously. Israeli cyber units were actively disabling radar systems, spoofing GPS signals, essentially blinding Iran's early warning capabilities and their air defenses right when the strikes were happening. And these actions, it's important to stress, they weren't reactive. They weren't responding to some immediate provocation. They were the culmination of a patient, long-term intelligence and military strategy, sometimes years in the making.
Years of planning.
Absolutely. Intelligence units like Mossad, the famous unit 8200, they had meticulously mapped underground sites, penetrated communication channels, embedded assets on the ground, all well in advance. The brilliance of this operation wasn't just its devastating effect, but also its timing. Swift, total, and designed to be highly deniable, especially on the international stage. This reflects a doctrine not of improvisation, but of deep foresight, systemic integration, and overwhelming escalation dominance. They actively shape the narrative of success and justification before the first missile even leaves the launcher. The key insight here really is that Israel's strategic philosophy isn't about traditional deterrence or diplomacy first. It's about active, preemptive dominance. They seem to believe force isn't just an option, it's the precursor to any political solution. And they're prepared to create the conditions for it, rather than wait for permission or react to a crisis.
Okay, so Israel operates with this highly refined, preemptive, tech-heavy doctrine. precursor to politics. What does that mean for Iran's actual military capabilities? How do they really stack up against such a, well, precise and decisive force? You hear so much conflicting stuff out there, like you said, people calling them incompetent versus others saying they're about to get nukes. What's the real picture?
You're absolutely right. The takes are all over the place, making it hard to get a clear picture. On paper, yeah, Iran might seem to have a numerical advantage. Much larger population, huge land area compared to Israel. But militarily, especially in a modern, high-tech conflict, those raw numbers often mean very little. Iran commands around 600,000 regular armed forces. They mostly do border guarding, conventional stuff, plus another 200,000 paramilitary Revolutionary Guard personnel. Now, that group is important. It includes the elite Quds Force, their Strategic Missile Command, their cyber forces.
The RGC, right.
Yeah, exactly. But a key point, and one that really shifts the balance, is that both Iran's conventional forces and its main proxies, think Hamas, Lebanon's Hezbollah, are widely believed to have been heavily degraded by U.S. and Israeli military operations over the past year or so.
So weakened.
Significantly weakened. Their offensive capabilities, while still there, are seriously curtailed compared to what they were. When it comes to equipment, Iran's military is often described, accurately I think, as a hodgepodge. It's a mix of older gear, some stuff even dating back to the Soviet Union or the U.S. from before the 1979 Islamic Revolution, plus some more recent Russian additions. Their Air Force, for example, is pretty antiquated, maybe 350 planes, significantly behind Israel in both the number and, crucially, the quality of modern aircraft.
But they do have strengths.
Oh, definitely. Where Iran does excel, and this is a crucial distinction, is its ability to produce a wide range of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, drones, and similar equipment. The Shahed attack drones. The ones they've sold in large numbers to Russia for use in Ukraine. That's a prime example of their indigenous capability. They're good at that. They also possess a truly vast arsenal of missiles, thousands of them. Many can reach Israel.
Thousands, yeah.
An Israeli military official noted they've used multi-warhead missiles, probably the Khorramshahr, which seems derived from a North Korean design. Now, it's important to understand these appear to deploy submunitions. They spread bomblets over an area rather than true MIRVs.
MIRVs being the ones where one missile has multiple warheads hitting different targets.
Exactly. Multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles. So Iran's missiles are numerous, but their precision isn't necessarily top tier compared to cutting-edge systems. Impressive in number, less so in sophisticated targeting. And a recurring critical problem for Iran has been the security of its top commanders. The head of the Revolutionary Guards, General Salami, General Bagheri, the chief of staff, killed in those June 2025 strikes.
Right, you mentioned that.
Yeah. And top nuclear scientists, other senior commanders, have also been targeted recently. It highlights a significant, persistent vulnerability in their command and control. They struggle to protect their key people. Now, the nuclear program, that's the big one everyone watches. Iran has advanced significantly. It's widely believed they have enough uranium enriched to near weapons grade levels to produce several nuclear weapons fairly quickly, maybe months if they decide to go for it.
If they make the political decision.
Exactly. But they'd still need more time, maybe 6 to 12 weeks, perhaps faster with outside help, to actually develop a missile warhead or another way to weaponize it into a deliverable device. Israel, however, is clearly not taking that chance. They've already struck facilities involved in manufacturing nuclear material and ballistic missiles, trying to degrade that capability before it's fully realized.
Okay, so that's Iran. Numbers, drones, missiles, but aging tech, command vulnerability, and a nuclear program that's close, but maybe not quite there yet in terms of weaponization. How does Israel compare directly?
Well, let's contrast that. Israel's forces land, sea, air, they benefit from the absolute latest U.S. and European technology. Plus, they have a really robust domestic defense industry. They can design, build, and sustain a full range of their own armaments. This integrated capability lets Israel take on opponents on multiple fronts simultaneously. That's a crucial advantage in such a volatile region. And for a relatively small nation, population-wise, Israel maintains a considerable number of troops. About 170,000 active duty, another 400,000 reserve.
Fewer than Iran overall.
Fewer in raw numbers, yes. But Israel's forces are extensively battle-hardened. Continuous regional conflicts give them invaluable practical experience and operational readiness. That's something sheer numbers just can't buy. They know how to fight. Then there's their multi-tiered missile defense system, Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow. Developed over decades, huge U.S. support. It's highly sophisticated. It can detect incoming fire and only deploys if a projectile is genuinely heading towards a populated area or sensitive site, saves interceptors, makes it more efficient.
Not foolproof, though.
Israeli leaders admit it's not 100% foolproof, no system is, but they credit it with preventing massive damage and casualties. Like during that huge Iranian missile attack in October 2024 caused only limited damage, partly because of crucial U.S. help in intercepting, and of course the elephant in the room. Israel is widely believed to be the only nuclear-armed state in the Middle East, though they've never officially admitted it. Strategic ambiguity.
Right. The Samson option people talk about.
Exactly. And finally, Israel has a steadfast, deeply committed ally in the United States. That alliance has been key in past conflicts, provides immense strategic and technological advantages far beyond just hardware. It's a massive force multiplier.
So it really boils down to this. Iran has numbers, drones, missiles. Israel has the qualitative edge, advanced tech, integrated systems, battle experience, sophisticated defenses, likely nukes, and the U.S. backing them up. It's clear asymmetry that Israel seems expert at exploiting with precision. That strategic advantage, that alliance, clearly gives Israel confidence. But what is the U.S. role in this high-wire act? And what are the potential ripple effects, regionally and globally? It feels like the stakes are always rising, and the U.S. is constantly hovering in the background.
Well, the U.S. has publicly tried to distance itself from direct involvement in specific Israeli actions, mostly for, political appearances. But the reality on the ground is starkly different. U.S. assets in the region, massive ones, could very easily become targets if Iran decides to retaliate broadly. We're talking an aircraft carrier group, maybe 60 fighters in the Arabian Sea, dozens of other jets at bases across the region, thousands of troops stationed in allied nations.
So a huge presence.
A huge presence. And we've seen the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, explicitly state that Israel took unilateral action against Iran, but in the same breath, warning Iran not to target U.S. forces in retaliation. It's a very delicate diplomatic balancing act.
Trying to have it both ways.
Trying to contain the fallout, certainly. And we saw tangible signs of the perceived threat level rising in the U.S., pulling some diplomats from Baghdad, offering voluntary evacuations for families of U.S. troops in the wider Middle East. Those aren't just symbolic moves. Before those June 2025 strikes, Iran had been making very loud threats, vowing massive retaliation for any attack, not just against Israel, but specifically targeting U.S. bases. One official even threatened to basically drive the U.S. out of the Middle East by destroying its military infrastructure.
Big talk.
Big talk, but reflecting real anger and perceived vulnerability. Israel, for its part, tried to preempt this. They worked hard to degrade Iran's ability to fight back before the main strikes, hitting proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah hard, bombing Iranian air defense systems. That preemptive degradation was a critical part of their strategy, trying to limit Iran's options for a meaningful response.
Right, trying to soften the counterpunch before it lands. But this leads to the critical question. What are the broader regional consequences of these escalated overt attacks? Are we looking at an irreversible shift? A new, more dangerous chapter in the Middle East?
These recent overt strikes really mark a dramatic departure from that long-simmering shadow war, this kind of open, direct, state-on-state military confrontation. It fundamentally changes the rules of engagement. Sure, both sides can continue firing missiles, and they have the capability, but this immediate stage of overt conflict, it's likely to be relatively short-lived, days, maybe weeks. The greater, more profound potential risk, the real strategic nightmare, frankly, is that these attacks might just harden Iranian resolve. Push them to aggressively pursue nuclear weapons, potentially leading to a fully nuclearized Middle East. That's the long-term destabilization risk.
The genie getting out of the bottle.
Precisely. Now, Iran's proxies, they've been badly damaged, yes. But they can still be used to some extent. We saw the Houthis get involved recently, signaling that capability isn't totally gone. But more importantly, Iran still has that vast arsenal of thousands of missiles and a whole suite of asymmetric tools. Cyber warfare, sabotage, terrorism, those are hard to counter, easy to deny.
Wow.
And it's looking increasingly likely that the Iranian leadership, Supreme Leader Khamenei's defense establishment, now see these Israeli strikes as an existential threat, a threat to the regime's survival itself.
And when regimes feel existential threats,
they tend to lash out with fewer constraints. Tehran will likely implement much less restrained responses, especially if the strikes continue, if civilian casualties mount. This perception changes everything. This conflict could genuinely remake the chessboard of the Middle East. If Israel does successfully neutralize Iran's nuclear program, and if that somehow destabilizes the Iranian regime, well, it could profoundly shift the regional balance of power. However, and this is a huge however, regime change in the Middle East is, as one analyst put it, a particularly fraught business. It's incredibly risky, outcomes are unpredictable, there's absolutely no guarantee of a positive or stable result. Look at Iraq, Libya.
Yeah, not a great track record.
Not at all. And the fact that Iran's weakened proxies couldn't deter Israel, that exposes deep strategic vulnerabilities for Iran. They might very well double down, accelerate efforts to rebuild those proxy forces. This direct conventional exchange might also signal Iran recognizing that proxy warfare alone isn't enough to address these existential threats. That could reshape the entire regional security architecture in unpredictable ways, new alliances, deeper divides, who knows?
And the economy, always a factor.
Absolutely. We saw oil prices jump immediately when Israel started hitting Iran. That tells you the markets are already pricing in increased risk, uncertainty. Two specific things to watch closely for global economic impact. One, does Iran attack Gulf Arab oil infrastructure? That's a major global supply source. Two, do they try to block passage through the Strait of Hormuz?
The critical choke point.
The critical choke point. A huge chunk of the world's oil flows through there. If either or both of those happen, energy prices are likely to spike much further. That significantly raises the risk of a global recession. Even if neither happens, you'll still have heightened risk, probably modest energy price increases. The world could likely adjust, but it'd still be a drag on global growth.
Okay, so major regional shifts, economic risks. What about the long-term nuclear picture for Iran? You said this might harden their resolve.
Almost certainly. These Israeli strikes will likely incentivize Iran to double down on getting nukes. Why? Because they feel vulnerable without them. Sure, key facilities have been degraded, scientists killed, but Iran's deeply buried underground nuclear sites, much harder for Israel to destroy completely. And Iran still retains significant nuclear expertise, the know-how. It's highly probable they'll alter their strategic calculus. They may actively pursue nuclear weapons now, despite the risks, or at least seriously reconsider their non-proliferation commitments. It's really hard to imagine Iran agreeing to more restrictions now, given these direct attacks and feeling existentially threatened.
And the international monitoring.
That's another huge problem. We know 27 IAEA surveillance cameras were forcibly removed from key enrichment sites. We know they reached 84% enrichment purity back in March 2025 at Fordo. That's just one tiny technical step from weapons grade. The IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi said in May 2025, the agency has lost continuity of knowledge at multiple sites.
Which basically means they're flying blind.
It's a diplomatic way of saying exactly that. Operational blindness. The international community doesn't have a reliable, continuous picture of what Iran's doing anymore. They can't verify materials, equipment. It makes accurate assessments incredibly difficult. Western intelligence now assesses Iran has enough enriched uranium for at least 3 nuclear devices and could potentially assemble a crude nuke within maybe 6 to 12 weeks, maybe even faster with outside technical help.
That's incredibly fast. And the facilities themselves, Fordo, Natanz, how badly were they hit?
Fordo was a key target because it's buried deep, built into a mountain, designed to survive conventional strikes. It houses thousands of advanced centrifuges. Satellite images showed craters consistent with precision bunker-busting munitions, likely collapsing internal tunnels, ventilation, but complete neutralization, uncertain. U.S. and Israeli intel saw a convoy of military trucks leaving Fordo days before the strike. Post-strike analysis suggests maybe core centrifuge components were moved either to a new, even deeper site near Arak or protected in reinforced side chambers.
So they might have anticipated it.
Possibly. Natanz suffered above-ground damage, but its underground halls, 20 meters deep, seem functionally compromised but intact. Isfahan's uranium conversion facility was hit but not destroyed. Suggests they might need follow-on strikes, maybe cyber attacks. So significant damage, yes. A knockout blow to the program, still very uncertain.
And the broader implication, the non-proliferation message this sends.
It's pretty devastating for non-proliferation diplomacy, frankly. It sends a chilling message. Even if you comply with international agreements, it might not protect you from preemptive attack if another nation sees you as a threat. You have North Korea with actual nukes, basically untouched. Iran, without openly having them, gets hit hard. Tehran's hardliners will absolutely point to this disparity as proof they need nukes for survival. The likely result: a regional nuclear arms race. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, they're now seriously considering getting their own independent deterrence. That could ignite a proliferation cascade, further eroding the post-WWII arms control structures. It makes the world a much more dangerous place, increasing the risk of nuclear conflict dramatically.
It's like watching this high-stakes global chess game. Incredibly complex, immense risks. But then you remember the pieces on that map are actual people, with lives, families, futures. Let's bring it back to that human level with the story of David, that junior aide to the defense minister. How did this strategic world collide with personal reality for him?
Right. David's story really bridges that gap. Aboard the flight to Washington, he felt this profound sense of purpose. He's reviewing these briefing notes filled with incredibly clean, decisive language. Stuff like maintaining qualitative military edge, neutralizing emergent threats, ensuring freedom of operation. From his seat on that plane, the conflict was all neat, tidy. A map of strategic objectives and acceptable risks. All probabilities and policy.
Detached.
Very detached. Then, in these sterile White House meeting rooms, the conversation felt like a high-stakes chess match, discussing satellite images of Iranian facilities, ballistic missile ranges, the political maneuvering needed to get a green light from President Trump for certain operations. They talked about recent raids in Gaza, strikes in Lebanon, citing them as successful models of proactive threat degradation. David felt this surge of professional pride. He genuinely believed he was witnessing history in the making, right there in the room where these huge decisions were being made. He was embedded in that strategic narrative.
Part of the big picture.
Exactly. But then came the collision, that jarring moment, that shift from the abstract to the intensely personal. It happened during a quick break. David scrolling through his phone, maybe just looking for a distraction, and he sees this desperate plea from an old high school friend, Leah. It's a photo of her younger brother, Yoni, in his IDF uniform, stationed in Jabalia, unheard from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And suddenly, the human assets and the acceptable casualty projections from those clean briefing documents, they had a face, a familiar face. Yoni, the kid who used to cheat off him in maps class, someone he knew. And in that terrifying second, the grand strategic chessboard just buckled under the weight of this personal connection. David could almost smell the dust and smoke of the board itself, the actual battlefield. Yeah. He realized how easily this high-level strategy becomes utterly detached from the devastating individual human cost. His professional distance just shattered.
That shift from the abstract map to the smell of dust and smoke on the ground, that's where the true, unvarnished story of war often lies, isn't it? We heard how Ben came home changed, how David saw Yoni behind the casualty projections. Now let's really dive into those experiences, the soldiers on the front lines, the micro picture. How does their daily reality differ from the public narratives we often hear?
It often differs dramatically. The public narrative clashes starkly with the soldiers' reality. Take the Israeli media coverage of the Gaza war, for example. It doesn't always reflect what's actually happening on the ground. Instead, soldiers' real, often incredibly painful experiences, they're frequently suppressed or carefully curated. Managed, exactly. Journalists embedded with military units, they're often shown carefully arranged scenes. Specific soldiers are chosen to speak, and what they can say is restricted. This often leads to these portrayals of them as a lion generation with high morale. It creates a very specific, sanitized image for public consumption that rarely captures the true psychological and physical burden they're carrying day in, day out.
But there are other voices.
There are. A powerful counter-narrative emerged from 5 young Israeli soldiers, fresh out of high school, basically kids. They'd served on the front lines for nearly 21 months, and they revealed a completely different truth. Their situation, they said, was painful and exhausting, filled with despair, anger, constant fear, and crucially, no end in sight. Their voices were largely unheard in Israeli society. Most wanted anonymity, understandably. But these 5 bravely agreed to speak out, but on one condition. You sent us to war, now please listen.
Please listen. That's powerful.
It really is. These soldiers were facing this constant, relentless accumulation of physical and psychological pressure, deeply worried about becoming the next casualty. It's a reality far, far removed from the confident headlines. Their stories force us to confront that chasm between what we're told and what's truly happening.
Let's hear some of these stories directly from the ground. Raw, unfiltered. They paint such a different picture from the lion generation narrative. These are experiences that must just burn into your mind.
They really do. These personal accounts reveal the severe, often psychological toll of urban combat. Take Yonatan from the Kafir Infantry Brigade in Jabalia. He recounted this really traumatic incident. They were near their position in the Jabalia refugee camp, and some barking dogs approached. His deputy commander, annoyed, maybe just on edge, killed them one by one. Claimed they were terrorist dogs, maybe had rabies, just like that.
Wow.
The very next day, they're clearing a house. An explosion erupts, throws Yonatan back, fills his mouth with what he thinks is his own blood. Turns out it was the blood of his best friend, severely injured, tragically never returned from the hospital.
Oh, my God.
After this, Yonatan couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Later, struggling overwhelmed, he leaves his guard post for just a few minutes at 2 a.m., felt suffocated, needed to wash his face, just cope for a second. For that brief human moment of desperation, court-martialed, sentenced to 28 days confinement. A harsh punishment that just compounds the original trauma.
Punished for reacting to trauma.
Essentially, yeah. Then there's Orr from the Paratrooper Reconnaissance Unit in Khan Yunis. He shared this unforgettable sight. Speaks volumes about the brutality of urban conflict. He recalled approaching the ruins of a house destroyed by an airstrike. Inside, amidst the rubble, they found 5 or 6 bodies. Some look like they've been gnawed by stray dogs.
Oh, horrific.
Among them were the remains of 2 small children. He described the sight as terrifying and unforgettable. Something clearly seared into his memory. A permanent scar. That's not something you just get over. And Yair, stationed in Bet Lahia, he shared an experience where 10 soldiers were ambushed at 2 a.m. while sleeping. He woke up to absolute chaos, his officer yelling hysterically, a scene completely out of control. And he emphasized, this isn't unusual. Situations like that are common for soldiers in Gaza. They can't rest during the day, have to do missions at night. He described them as being about to collapse from exhaustion and stress. He frankly thought it was a miracle. Hamas hadn't exploited their profound exhaustion more aggressively. The constant vigilance, lack of sleep, unpredictable threats, it pushes them to their absolute limits, far beyond what any civilian can really imagine.
The physical and mental exhaustion must be incredible.
Incredible. And Yair's personal toll was immense. He said the war was destroying him. During home leave, supposed to be recovery time, he became emotionally unstable, argued with his girlfriend constantly for no reason, started losing large clumps of hair from stress.
Physical signs.
Stark physical signs of the internal turmoil. He felt like his entire squad had been wiped out, even though many were still alive. Said he was living like a shadow, a ghost of his former self. Shows how deep the impact goes, far beyond the battlefield itself. And Yuri, from the Yahalom Engineer Unit, his story really encapsulates this profound disillusionment many soldiers eventually face. He said initially he believed the narrative. They were writing history, protecting Israeli civilians, rescuing hostages. Those were the official reasons, the noble cause.
What he signed up for.
Exactly. But that belief slowly collapsed. He heard of more hostages dying from airstrikes, essentially friendly fire. He attended one funeral after another for fallen comrades. He got to a point where he said he could no longer perform missions, didn't want to re-enter areas they'd cleared countless times, knowing they'd likely have to do again, didn't want to go into homes that might be booby-trapped. The cycle felt endless, pointless.
For what?
That was his question. For what? He concluded, with this heartbreaking clarity, any rational person can see this war is for political service, that nothing has been won, that they were simply risking lives for no reason. And his call to action, his plea to society was just desperate. Do you have to wait for 900, 1,000 deaths to understand you should stop? Please stop, speak out, protest, don't let the deaths continue. These are the voices so often silenced, ignored by the official narrative. They reveal the real devastating cost of strategic decisions.
These accounts
Yeah.
They really underscore the immense psychological burden. It's clear these experiences take a massive toll, often invisible. But the military, as an institution, they have a long history of trying to understand this, manage it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. How has our understanding evolved? Why is it so prevalent now?
That's right. And the psychological costs, they're no less debilitating, sometimes even more insidious than physical wounds. I've actually heard soldiers say they'd rather be an amputee.
Really?
Yeah, because, as one put it, at least when you looked at me, you could see what my problem was. It highlights the invisible nature of this profound suffering. It's been observed for centuries, of course, just called different things. Soldier's heart in the U.S. Civil War, kind of anxiety, panic. Shell shock in World War I, initially thought to be physical brain damage from explosions. Battle fatigue in World War II, a broader term for combat stress. It wasn't until 1980 that post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, was formally included as a diagnosis in the DSM-5, the big psychiatric manual. They gave it a standardized clinical framework.
And modern conflicts. OEF, OIF, and Afghanistan, Iraq.
Those conflicts really pushed our understanding further. They exposed military personnel to unprecedented combat scenarios. We're talking irregular, asymmetric warfare. Often in dense urban areas, no clear front lines. The enemy is often dispersed within civilian populations. Makes it incredibly hard to distinguish combatant from non-combatant. that lack of clarity. It intensifies the psychological difficulty, leads to moral injuries, that constant hypervigilance. Plus, you have goodwill missions happening alongside fighting, blurs the lines between aid and combat, increases the chance of sudden attacks, civilian casualties in unexpected ways. This whole chaotic, ambiguous environment, it contributes to significantly higher rates of mental health issues. Staggeringly, 1 in 3 post-9/11 veterans seeking treatment have been diagnosed with PTSD.
1 in 3, that's huge.
Enormous. And adding another layer is traumatic brain injury, TBI, especially from blasts. It's been called the signature wound of modern warfare. Nearly half of post-9/11 vets seeking treatment have TBI diagnoses, and there's a strong link between TBI and PTSD. They often co-occur, make each other worse. It's a really tough combination.
So what are the core symptoms? How does PTSD manifest?
Well, the core features are really profound memory disruptions and this dysfunctional threat processing. The brain's alarm system gets stuck on TBs. Individuals often experience a constant heightened state of arousal, increased resting heart rate, even when they should be calm. Their body is perpetually stuck in fight or flight. They show what's called an attentional bias toward threats, meaning they have extreme difficulty disengaging from anything perceived as dangerous. Always scanning, always vigilant.
Hypervigilant.
Exactly. And it has measurable physiological responses. Larger pupil sizes, increased skin conductance, your skin gets slightly wetter. Classic stress response-specific brain activity changes like reduced frontal theta power, which messes with regulating emotion and processing information. Cardiovascular effects too. Increased heart rate, blood pressure when reminded of the trauma, often depressed heart rate variability, meaning less ability to adaptively cope with stress, even everyday stuff.
And the re-experiencing, flashbacks.
That's a key diagnostic criterion. Persistent re-experiencing of the traumatic event through distressing memories, vivid nightmares, or feeling like the trauma is happening right now, like a living nightmare you can't wake up from. Exposure to triggers internal thoughts, external stimuli, can set off intense psychological distress or severe physical reactions. Some triggers are obvious, right? Loud bangs, gunfire. But others can be highly specific, deeply personal. A particular song that was playing, a certain smell, even a tone of voice. And people with PTSD actively avoid these triggers. They try desperately to keep away from anything that might bring back those unbearable memories and feelings. Often leads to social isolation, a really constricted life, trying to make the world smaller, safer.
It sounds incredibly debilitating. Given these profound, often invisible effects, how does the military as an institution approach mental health? What kind of support or sometimes resistance do soldiers face when they try to get help for these very real wounds?
Well, the institutional response has definitely evolved, but significant challenges remain. Colonel Thomas Burke, who directs mental health policy for the DoD, said something really telling. Nobody comes back from combat unchanged. He also added that the expectations soldiers and their families have about their return, all of them, gonna be wrong. That's a powerful acknowledgement of the transformation combat brings. Yet, the military culture itself often struggles to fully embrace that.
There's a disconnect.
A huge disconnect sometimes. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, retired Army Ranger, points to what he sees as a critical gap in training. Soldiers are drilled relentlessly on how to shoot accurately, make it muscle memory, but they often aren't prepared emotionally for the act of killing itself or witnessing its aftermath. Grossman controversially suggests the military basically tricks you into killing. And if a soldier can't accept or rationalize what they've done or seen, he says, they spin down one of the paths to PTSD. He notes that in World War II, psychiatric casualties outnumbered those killed by the enemy, yet there's this persistent tendency for the psychologically wounded to feel there's something wrong with them. Fosters this deep sense of shame.
The stigma.
The stigma is absolutely huge, as Andrew Pomerantz, a VA mental health chief, put it. The biggest barrier, fear of being seen as a wimp, someone who can't hack it. This leads to real fear of retribution, fear of career-ending consequences if you admit you're struggling. Imagine risking everything just to get help for an injury you didn't ask for. And Jonathan Shea, a psychiatrist, added that changes made high up in the Pentagon, they don't always trickle down effectively to change beliefs and behaviors in the field. Policy versus reality.
And Andrew Pagani's story. That sounds like an extreme example of that resistance.
It's a truly egregious example. U.S. Army Special Forces interrogator. Less than a week in Iraq, 2003, sees a mutilated body, starts having panic attacks. His command initially refused his request for help. Then his sergeant major publicly calls him a coward, a thing pie, tells him 50 years ago they'd have just shot him.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Publicly shamed.
Publicly shamed. He was actually charged with cowardly conduct before the enemy. That charge was later reduced, eventually dropped, but the initial response sent a chilling message. Fear will not be tolerated, end unquote. This kind of severe institutional pressure directly impacts soldiers' willingness to seek help. So many, like Jeff Lucey will talk about, would just check the box on post-combat forms saying, they're fine, I'm a fear, just because they wanted to go home, avoid being held for evaluation. Asking for help is seen as admitting that you're failing, that you need somebody else to help you. It goes against that whole military ethos of self-sufficiency, strength at all costs.
But there are efforts being made, support systems.
Yes, there have been positive developments. You have combat stress control teams, now mental health specialists deployed right on the front lines, like Cheyenne Forsyth, who met with Pagani. That's a crucial shift towards immediate on-site help. There's also resiliency training, an ongoing initiative trying to build psychological strength before, during, and after deployment. And back in 2005, the DoD mandated a new mental health screening, not just immediate post-combat, but a follow-up 3 to 6 months later. The idea was to catch emerging problems, reduce stigma by making it mandatory for everybody, normalize it.
So progress, but maybe slow.
Incremental progress, yeah. But the military isn't monolithic. Different branches, different commanders have different approaches. Culture shifts take a long, long time. And there are still real concerns about funding for VA mental health care, keeping pace with the massive demand. Some veterans worry that talk of re-engineering mental health services is just code for budget cuts, for you're going to get screwed. A very stark, cynical view born from experience. Ultimately, the plea from those affected and those trying to help is simply to not forget that these people are putting their life in harm's way and they're going through hell. It's a call for societal understanding and robust, consistent support that goes beyond just military programs.
It's truly heartbreaking to hear how the system, even with good intentions sometimes, can fail the very people carrying its heaviest burdens. Jeff Lucey's story, which you mentioned, is just such a profoundly tragic example of that silent battle so many veterans face when they come home, a battle that too often ends in quiet despair.
Jeff Lucey's story is a profound illustration, yeah. The hidden toll, even when someone seems physically okay, outwardly adjusted. After returning home, seemingly fine, his family noticed this slow, steady deterioration. Started drinking heavily, usually alone, became more and more isolated from people who loved him. He eventually started talking about Iraq, but always with this disturbing distance, saying things like, "You'd never understand," conveying that deep chasm between his trauma and their reality. He was plagued by disturbing images, phantom smells, frequent nightmares, relentlessly replaying horrors, blurring waking and sleeping. But despite his family begging him, he was incredibly reluctant to get counseling, feared any sign of weakness, thought it was a personal failing.
That's stigma again.
That powerful stigma. Tragically, he refused to go to the VA. He had this wrong idea, it was still part of the military, that seeking help there would disappoint his officers, hurt his record. In reality, the VA is separate. Records are private. But that misconception, that stigma, stopped him from getting potentially life-saving help. His distress escalated dramatically, started hearing voices, hallucinating, feeling hands on him, seeing faceless old people, even a fox's head. He started telling these horrific, fabricated war stories, burying bodies, being ordered to kill prisoners, things his fellow Marines who were with him confirmed never happened. Shows a profound break from reality, a descent into psychosis.
Just completely unravel it.
Completely. He had a brief, unwilling stay at the VA. Medical notes actually said he had a plan to harm himself, but he was discharged days later as no longer in imminent danger. Lack of resources, misunderstanding the severity, who knows? His condition got dramatically worse after that. At his sister's college graduation, just 11 months after coming home, he showed up so impaired he could barely walk. A shocking contrast to the young man who deployed. He isolated himself completely then, retreated into his torment. Tragically, his mother found him, hanging from a garden hose.
Oh, God.
His family said later they never knew how deep the despair was, how tormented he was. His fellow Marines were stunned, wished he had talked. It just underscores that profound isolation so many vets feel, unable to reveal their inner struggles, even to loved ones, because of that pervasive stigma. And Jacob Martin's experience adds another layer of concern. Home, 8 months, still struggling with intensely anger, suicidal thoughts, after only 10 weeks in a therapy group, redeployed to Iraq.
Sent back. While still struggling.
Sent back. It raises serious, uncomfortable questions about the military prioritizing ready force numbers, even if it means redeploying psychologically injured soldiers, potentially making their injuries far worse, perpetuating the cycle of suffering and tragedy. It highlights that deep systemic tension between mission readiness and individual well-being.
So what we're really seeing here consistently is this profound, often devastating chasm. On one side, you have the grand strategic narratives, nations, victory, strength. On the other, the brutal, personal, often hidden realities of combat. The quiet despair. This deep dive keeps revealing this dramatic disconnect.
Indeed. And this exploration has clearly shown that while political and military leaders meticulously craft these narratives of strength, success, control, the ground truth for those actually experiencing the conflict, it's frequently one of profound psychological toll, deep disillusionment. And this divide, it isn't accidental, it's often intentionally created, carefully managed. Well, the military and political leadership actively control the public discourse around conflict. It involves what some call preemptive strategic communication. Basically designed to manufacture consent for military actions. They meticulously frame operations like portraying Hamas rocket attacks as terrorism equivalent to 9/11 to gain that crucial window of international legitimacy, public support. They also pre-position narratives through things like intelligence leaks, shaping perceptions before events even happen, ensuring public diplomacy follows military logic, not the other way around. This includes that highly selective process we talked about, choosing which soldiers speak to the media, strictly restricting what they can say. That directly contributes to the lion generation image that so often masks the deeper struggle, the true state of morale on the ground. It's a carefully constructed reality built for public consumption.
And when those narratives collide with personal reality,
the collision is heartbreaking, deeply impactful. Look at Miriam's story again. Her fierce patriotism, initially boosted by those confident TV reports, slowly corroded by a gnawing, unspoken fear as she saw Ben's broken reality. That list of 7 names, "These are my friends," just shattered the booming voice of victory on her TV, shows how quickly official narratives can be utterly obliterated by personal truth, a single piece of paper weighing more than all the news reports.
and David, the aide.
David's professional pride in proactive threat degradation just dissolved into this sickening realization when Yoni, that familiar face, became a human asset within the cold math of acceptable casualty projections. That personal connection made the abstract war terrifyingly real, caused a strategic chessboard to buckle under the weight of empathy, the brutal reality of distant decisions. His whole perception shifted.
And Yair, the soldier who felt like a lion in a cage.
Yair's story powerfully illustrates the disconnect, touted as part of the lion generation in the papers. But he and his comrades felt like lions trapped in a cage, slowly starving. He had this sudden, painful realization. He wasn't fighting for his home anymore. His home was safe. He was fighting and dying so that men in clean suits could have successful meetings in air-conditioned rooms an ocean away. For him, the mission wasn't about winning anymore. It was just to keep fighting it, exposing that tragic gap between grand strategic goals and the profound, often meaningless feeling sacrifices on the front lines. The war became about perpetuating itself.
And the societal impact of this disconnect.
It creates this profound societal cognitive dissonance. You see it in how veterans are viewed simultaneously as heroes and as broken individuals. Like, we can't hold both truths. This disconnect ultimately threatens national security. It impacts young people's willingness to serve. Why sign up for a reality you're not prepared for? It increases the immense burden on military members and their families, leaving them feeling isolated, misunderstood. It creates this widening civil-military divide. Civilians struggle to grasp the experience. Service members feel alienated from a society seeing only part of their story. Those emotional pleas from soldiers like Yuri asking society to stop, speak out, protest, not let the deaths continue, they highlight this profound disconnect. When the lived experience of war is so dramatically different from the official story, it erodes trust in leadership, creates deep societal fractures, prevents real healing. It forces us all to confront the uncomfortable truth about the real human cost of every single strategic decision.
We've covered so much ground today. Navigating these complex, often contradictory landscapes, from international strategy, the big chess game, to the intensely personal suffering. From the geopolitical calculations where nations define survival through preemptive strikes and alliances, down to the silent, unseen battles fought inside the hearts and minds of soldiers on the front lines, it really does reveal 2 distinct, yet totally linked realities of conflict.
Absolutely. And this deep dive has really shown, I think, that while political and military leaders are busy crafting these narratives of strength, success, control, The ground truth, the lived reality for those caught in it. It's frequently one of profound psychological toll, disillusionment, moral injury. And the tension between these two realities, it isn't just some abstract idea, it's a lived experience. It shapes individuals, families, entire societies in ways we're honestly only beginning to fully comprehend. It leaves these legacies that far outlast any ceasefire or peace treaty.
Ultimately, understanding these dual realities, seeing both the strategic map and the human face of war, it feels crucial. Crucial for anyone seeking to be truly well-informed about how modern conflict actually works. It's about looking beyond the headlines, beyond the official statements, and acknowledging the complex, often incredibly painful human cost wrapped up in every single strategic decision. It reminds us that behind every policy paper, every military operation, there are people like Ben, David, Yonatan, or Yair, and Yuri, whose experiences demand our full, unvarnished attention.